You're listening to Why Germany podcast, the best place for relocation stories and expert tips, sponsored by Over the Offic, relocation agency to Germany, with your host, Eden Levine.
Hello and welcome to the podcast Why Germany. My name is Eden Levine and with me is Dara Wissinger.
Yeah.
Wissinger. Okay, perfect. Thank you so much for coming and joining our podcast.
My pleasure. I'm happy to do it.
Yes, great. So just like with everybody, I'm going to start with the question, why Germany, Dara?
I came to Germany because I married a German. So my husband's German and he led us here. So it wasn't on my list of places to move to necessarily, but he's what led us to Germany. So,
but here you are. All right, we're going to hear a lot about it in the coming minutes. But I would say, how about you start with your relocation story?
Sure. So I'll start a little bit at the beginning of my expat journey. So I've been abroad from America. I'm from America originally for almost 7 years, which is not what I planned. So I got my master's degree and then I thought, oh, I'll take a gap year and I'll go to Asia. I got a job with the Walt Disney Company to work in Shanghai, China. And I just wanted to see the world. So I took that gap year, which led to the 7 years. So I met my husband in Shanghai, and then his company had us stay in Shanghai longer than I planned. I ended up teaching at international school after working with Disney for a bit. And then we moved to Singapore for 2 years. We spent all of COVID in Singapore, and then we came here to Germany. And we've been in Germany for almost 2 years.
You've been in Germany for 2 years and close to Nuremberg.
Yes.
Somewhere next to Nuremberg, but not in the city.
No, we're not in the city. We're in kind of a suburb, if you will, of Nuremberg. Close enough. I can go into the city when I need, but still quiet and out a bit.
Wow. But it's a different move from Shanghai, which is huge. And into a
very different move. Yeah. I mean, from going from one of the biggest cities in the world, and Singapore is quite populous as well and has a lot to do on the island. And then going to like Nuremberg is a city, but not quite in the comparative of what we lived in. So it's been a big change having different resources than what we had before, different types of entertainment. I do more hikes now.
Wow.
So I do different activities than what I did before. But it's been really interesting and it's been really intriguing and fun for me as well to learn more about my husband's culture. We knew about each other's cultures before, but getting to live in his culture, I feel like I learned more about him too along the way.
Of course. Of course. I'll take you a little bit back because I would imagine that if you're saying, hey, I want to take a gap year in Asia, like this is something that I plan probably on coming back, maybe doing this, maybe doing that. And all of a sudden you landed up in a whole different culture, whole different country with a husband all of a sudden. Yeah. And especially with the sense that you probably came with some idea of what Germany is going to be like and what is it going to contain, and then Tell me about like this experience of coming with these thoughts of what Germany is like and how it's actually in reality for you.
How it's been in reality, yeah. So I wanted to stay in Asia longer. And so my husband got this role. We had actually just signed to be in Singapore for 2 more years. So we actually still would have been in Singapore now. So the move to Germany was a little bit of a shock. And they gave us a very short notice to move. I think we had a few months to pack up everything.
Wow.
And so that in itself was a bit of a shock. And so that adjustment period took a while. But I think one thing that I didn't expect is how big the language barrier would be. Because we've lived in Shanghai before, I don't speak Mandarin fluently. I went in knowing nothing in Mandarin. I picked it up along the way. So I could talk to people in restaurants. I could, tell my taxi driver where to go and those kinds of basics. But there wasn't an expectation as a foreigner for me to know the language. Whereas in Germany, I look German, as well as I'm married to a German. So there is more of kind of a pressure and expectation to know the language. And German is quite difficult to learn. So that I think I wasn't as aware of what I needed to know for that experience. And I wish I would have been a little bit better prepared because we speak English at home. It's the language we fell in love with. It's the language we've communicated in for our entire relationship. So there wasn't an expectation living in Asia for me to learn German. And I didn't necessarily think we would move here someday. I figured I could, but we didn't know. That I think has been very different.
Right. Okay. And how was it like to land here first time? Like what came to you as like, the language is something that can be very challenging, of course, but maybe something that is culturally shocking to you.
Oh, I think so. We're in Bavaria, right? So I think in Bavaria, the culture is a little bit different. So at least from what I've been told and what I've experienced, the Bavarians are a little bit harder to crack the shell.
Wow.
So they're a little bit harder to get to know. And I think that has been a little bit true. I'm very outgoing and I want to talk to people. And so I'm used to being in America where I chit chat in the grocery store line and, I talk to people as I walk around. And so here, we've been in the same place for 2 years and even it's still hard to talk to my neighbors and they speak English and they will speak English with me. But even then they seem a little bit more, more into their own communities. And so it's harder to break into those communities. So I found that to be a little bit of a challenge within the communities in Germany. It's that a lot of times they say, once you make a German, you're friends for life. When you make friends with a German, right? That you're friends for life with them, but it takes a long time to get there. It does take a while. Whereas Americans, I think we're a little bit more, let's go grab a coffee. I'll be your friend tomorrow. So I think that's a little bit harder coming into that culture. It's been an interesting time.
Yeah, so basically creating your community and finding your friends can be challenging and can be like you need to learn how to do that properly.
Yeah.
But on the contrary, I would imagine like with your husband, it was probably easier than if you would take a normal German or like somebody else.
That's helped to have a German husband. I have some expat friends that are, they're both expats. And they say, how do you do it without having a German speaker? It's such an advantage to have a German speaker at home for document translation or just understanding the culture and, how to communicate and first communications with our neighbors or things of that nature. And so I am very blessed that I have my husband for that. I would be even more so lost without. So it is a good positive to have.
Amazing. But do you think he was able to understand your process of basically coming to Germany and adjusting? Was it easy for him or?
At first, it was hard for him. So he had different expectations of what it would be like coming back home. And so I don't think he anticipated the transition being hard for him as well. Because
really?
He had been abroad. We were abroad in Asia for about 5 years, both of us, before we ended up moving here. So for him, I think just some things culturally he had forgotten as well. And just readjusting to that back from Asia was a little bit of a challenge for him. But he's been really understanding. We did have some challenges at the beginning, just in terms of understanding where my frustrations with the language barrier or just things being so different from Asia, but also from America. So I kind of had two different backgrounds of this is so different for Germany, whereas for him, some of this was home. And so he didn't have those adjustments. He didn't have those frustrations or challenges. And so he's had such an immense amount of patience with me.
Wow, that's great.
Give him credit because there's some days where I'm just really upset or I'm just overwhelmed, and he's been very, very patient and trying to understand like why I'm feeling that way. But it's been a journey, right? It takes time, and as an expat, we've moved every 2.5 years for our moves, and it really takes about 2 years to get your footing really where you live and settle. And so I now feel like now that we're hitting the 2-year mark with here, I finally kind of feel my most comfortable. And now I feel like I can really get into the groove of life here.
Wow. Okay. That's great. I mean, when I came to Germany, I always asked, how long does it take to speak German? Yeah. I wouldn't say fluently, but at least, feel comfortable, start to speak in German. And everybody told me 3 years. So for me, it was really a relief to hear that.
Yeah.
Because it was like, okay, so I'm not yet there, right? I'm not expected yet to be in that position, so I'm good. So it sounds to me like getting like the 2 years, it's somewhat aligned also with this, when do I feel comfortable in speaking German? And even if you're not yet feeling comfortable with German, you at least understand like, okay, what are my supermarkets, where to go, how the public transportation works, at least what's the mentality is like, so it's I would say it matches somewhat with this timeline. How do you feel about your German? Let's go with that.
I wish I was more confident in my German. I have done.
Hey, then you have another year.
Some wiggle room. I've done some intensive courses with like the Volksschule, but I'm not confident in that. It's an intense process. It's a lot. I give a lot of credit to people that go through those intensive courses back to back for 6 or 8 months, because it takes a lot out of you. It's very hardcore and draining. I am hoping that I will return to that. We have some travel upcoming, and we're buying a home. And so lots of things happening in life. And so hopefully I'll return back to that in the fall. But right now I'm taking a little bit of a break.
Yeah, we're going to talk also about you buying a house, because this is something very interesting. I want to understand, like, paint me the picture of this moment when you're calling like your friends and family. Hey, I found a guy here, and it seems like this one year gap is turning into a very like much longer, and then also eventually I'm also moving with him to Germany. How's it like?
Oh, my poor parents. So what's funny is, when I left, I just thought, well, I'll see you in a year. I'll return back home. And the next time I came back was a year and a half later, until I went back to the States, and I returned with my husband at that time, with my boyfriend. We were still dating. And so I brought him home. Was the first time I came back. And, years later, as we got married, my mom goes, right after you left, I turned to your dad and I go, she'll come back with a husband.
Doesn't sound so poor to me. It seems like their dream was coming true, basically.
I guess they knew more than I knew, because I didn't think that would happen. I just thought, I'll go travel and have fun. And, wasn't planning on coming back with a husband. So it was a lot. It was surprising to them, for sure. And I don't think
especially that he is German and not Asian.
Yeah, exactly. How I found a German in the middle of Shanghai, I don't know. It wasn't in my plans for sure. But they took it really well, and they've really welcomed him with open arms, and he has a great relationship with my family, and I'm super blessed with how great all of that has gone out, but definitely not how anything that I planned in life.
Probably not. Have they been to Germany since you came?
They have not been yet. So my dad just retired, so we're hoping they'll come this year. We're hoping we can get them to the Christmas markets, because I feel like that's the experience you have to have first.
Of course. For those of you who don't know, Nuremberg has one of the prettiest markets. Also Leipzig, by the way.
Yep.
But Nuremberg is really, really known for the Christmas market, and actually a lot of cities in Germany has they all have something different, but if you get a chance to experience more than one, I definitely recommend that. Absolutely. Great. So there was one thing that we spoke about when we spoke before in a conversation. You told me something that stuck with me, and you said, so yes, my husband is German, and for him, maybe the transition back home wasn't that easy, but it is not a home for me. It is a home for him. So tell me more about that feeling that you like about that sentence.
It's hard, right? Because when you're an expat, your home in your home country no longer is technically home, even if your family is there, and then you move to all these places. And I think the hard part for us is we've uprooted so many times in so many years. So it really is hard to develop those relationships and to create those roots. And so we're hoping now with buying a home that we can kind of have more roots here and feel that way. But it is for him, it was him returning home for Germany. But for me, it wasn't. It was saying that I'm the expat now alone in this scenario a little bit, right? Because for him, this is where he grew up. He grew up in this country. He's not from this area, but it's his language, it's his culture, it's his normal grocery stores, it's, all the things he's familiar with. So for me, that was really tough, especially in the first year, is it kind of felt, as much as my husband was really supportive, it felt kind of lonely some days. I felt like I was the only one kind of struggling or going through this transition, when you're having a partner that it's their home country and it's not yours, because you need a lot more time to adjust to that, right?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I always say that I don't have feeling that I'm Israeli anymore, but also I'm not German. Although I'm 6 years in Germany, I am kind of a lot of people tell me they are the citizen of the world, which is somewhat of how I feel, like I'm not really German, but yeah, this is something that a lot of expats are feeling like, and it's a different and this different of understanding of what home is like for you.
Yeah.
So a lot of people have that home feeling from the culture, from the food, from the family, from the friends, from their home, I don't know, something that they're used to. And I think when it's in the expat experience, what you declare as home is kind of where you miss the most, right? So
that's true. And I think too, it makes me realize, especially with the more moves I've done, is that, I've chosen the moves to follow my spouse, right? And to follow his career and his successes. And that, the more I realize that is that he's my home, right? So, and that he is the home for me. So we could be in Singapore again, we could be in China again, we could be here or somewhere else. He is my home. The other things aside is that I'm most comfortable and most me when I'm with him and when he's with me. So I think you realize that too, that doesn't have to necessarily be a place.
Yeah, and I think it's something that is more of a feeling that is changing with your experience.
Yeah.
And I say that I'm not German because I don't feel like Germanized completely, and I don't think it's gonna happen. I Germanized enough.
Yeah.
I stayed Israeli enough. I'm somewhat of like a foreign, but not, you know?
Yeah.
And it's true that it's like you create that community for yourself and those people who are close to you, and that's what you call home. I think that's like very strong. And it's funny also because I brought my family to Germany, but until then, my friends who I collected in my community, they were my family. They were like the substitute to a family somewhat.
And that's so important, right? When you're an expat, is to find that group and that community and to find those other people. And as much as you can become friends with local, people from that country, and that's great to have that experience and expertise, it's also great to have other expats because they're the only ones that can really understand what you're giving up and what you're sacrificing or what those feelings are and those emotions still living abroad, right? And so we've had wonderful blessings. We've been so blessed that we have friends from where we've lived all over and we're still in contact and we visit each other and we have great friends here. And so we've been really blessed with our expat journey of friends. But it is so pivotal, especially when you're holidays away from home and your family. I think social media is great. It's a great way for us to communicate with our families and it makes me feel really connected. But at the same time, the holidays sometimes are so hard because then everyone's sharing all these cute family photos and all the things they've done together. And so sometimes you're like, oh, that's when it makes it sometimes a little bit harder. But when you have great friends that you can do Friendsgivings with, or Christmases with, or things like that, if you can't make it home, it really does make a difference.
Absolutely. And this is also why I'm saying to everybody, like when you're relocating, find your community as fast as possible. It's really what's going to make or break your relocation process.
Yes, that's so, so true.
If you want to learn more about relocation to Germany, look for Over the Ofek on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn.
And if we're talking about creating community, tell me about the differences in community from, Asia, like the culture and the mentality from Germany.
I think with Asia, especially with Shanghai, so we lived in the middle of the city, is that it was a very distinct expat area. So you knew kind of exactly where the expats lived because it was the more English-speaking area. They had more expat-friendly scenarios and neighborhoods. And then, so it was easy to find your friends. Like you would go to a restaurant and you'd run into people you knew. And so it was really easy to find other English speakers and other expats. Whereas with Germany, everyone kind of lives everywhere. We all live in the villages. We all live in the little suburbs. We all kind of live within the city. And so, it's not as easy, I don't think, to geographically find people within the cities you live in. At least that's the way I found it here, because our area, with Nuremberg, you have Erlangen nearby, and Herzogenaurach is nearby, and those are major hubs for other corporations. So people kind of live dotted around those regions, but they also live within Nuremberg too. So it makes it kind of hard to find expats easily. You kind of have to search for them a little bit more here. Whereas in Shanghai, I can kind of go to the coffee place and, oh, hi, you're from America too. Great. How's it going? And so for Germany, it's just not as easy. You kind of have to join groups a little bit more actively. You have to find things in the area. You have to find English Stammtisches or things of that nature.
Mm-hmm. And from the locals, what are the major differences you've noticed?
I think for Shanghai, especially, and for Singapore too, is that usually the locals wanted to be friends with foreigners because they wanted to improve their English, or they would kind of do it as like, oh, I'm really cool. I have these foreign friends sometimes too, which is no problem at all. It was a great way to learn about their culture and to exchange our knowledge and information. Whereas Germany, I just think it takes a little bit more time. I think you just have to have a little bit more time and a little bit more effort and planning, right? Because you have to plan so far in advance to do things here with people. You have months in advance to make plans with people. So I think it's just a little bit more effort to put in to make local friends in Germany. And that's not a bad thing. It just takes more time.
Yeah, no, and it's the kind of thing that you also know who are those who really want to have those foreign friends, because they will come to the expat meeting sometimes, and they would try their best to also practice their English and to they really appreciate it. A lot of the times they would be those who, like your husband, spend some time abroad and really appreciate this multicultural experience with many people from different countries. So you have those. You have also those who are very Germanized and are like, yeah, I want to keep more of a German bubble than the rest. You have both, but it's also, I would imagine that because you are in a suburb, it would be probably harder to find expats and those groups and meetings. But what do you do? How do you find them actually?
So I think, thankfully, with Nuremberg being a little bit bigger, you do have to go into the city more. So there are usually English events once a week. We go to a local church that's also English speaking. So it's all with expats, which has been a really great community to build here, because we do have, like-minded views and things of that nature. I also am part of the American Institute here. So they have them in most cities, most major cities throughout Germany. So they have an English library, they have English events. So I was able to find them online before we came. And then I went to them like 2 weeks into moving here and was like, hi, how can I find you? So that helps. So I think you just have to be really, again, it's just a little bit more effort, right? So it just takes a little bit more planning, a little bit more effort. You really have to follow things on Instagram and Facebook and look up Stammtisch events and like global locals, Girls Gone International. So there's a lot of really great organizations, especially even for just women, or I have a lot of friends who are moms. There's a lot of English speaking mom groups in the area. So it's a really great way to connect in that sense, but you do have to kind of make the effort to go out and do the events. So it's just sometimes hard, right?
Absolutely.
Whereas in Asia, I felt like I knew who the expats were because, the people that were speaking English, it was easier to hear them or see them. I knew what areas they were living in. So it was easier to find those people and you would just chit chat and talk. Whereas Germany, I think it's just a little bit harder. But again, it's just a little bit more effort. Once you find that, it does make it easier, I think, to find that community here.
Right. In Shanghai, and in Shanghai and also in Germany, you needed a visa process to go through a visa process, right? Tell me the difference.
Oh, okay. So
we open a Pandora box.
So for Shanghai, it was a 6-month process and everything had to be done before I came into the country. And that was crazy. I was finishing up my master's, trying to do all the paperwork and process. And everything for Shanghai has to be apostilled and certified. So you have to send everything in on top of getting the paperwork first. My passport, I think, was gone. I didn't have it for, I think, 4 or 5 months.
Oh, damn.
Yeah, it was a really long process for Shanghai. And then the funny thing is they make you do a lot of the same things once you arrive. So I had to do a full medical panel before I came. I had to do the same thing when I got in the country.
Oh.
Yeah, so Shanghai's was very intense. Like it was a long process and it was quite costly. I think I spent several $1,000s to get to Shanghai. The company helped reimburse it once I was there for a certain period of time. I could apply for that, but it was a very long process to get through. And then the time difference between America and China.
Oh, of course.
Made it very hard to get all the paperwork done from abroad, because then I couldn't contact the people very easily to be able to go back and forth that were working with the company I was with. So that was a challenge. So China was definitely the hardest. Singapore was the easiest by far. So we showed up, I gave my passport, my husband gave his work contracts, we went to one meeting, and then 2 weeks later I picked up my card to be able to live there, and it was easy breezy, the nicest, easiest system. Germany was a little bit more challenging. Because one thing that helped is that I'm married to a German, and that we had all of our paperwork done ahead of time. So the biggest thing I can say to anyone that is married to a German coming here that needs a visa is have all of your paperwork apostilled before you come to Germany and have all that taken care of. So we knew that we would need that at some point anyway, if we had children later on down the line, things of that nature. So we took care of all of that when we got married. So I had my birth certificate apostilled, we had our marriage certificate apostilled, we had all the extra documents. So we came here for this process. It made it speedier. Something I wish though that we would have been told when we moved here is that your first address location is dependent on what government agency that you'll be working with, right? If you will, for the document process for the visa. So Nuremberg is historically known to be quite a challenge to work with getting your visas done. And so we had our first address was in Nuremberg, and we did it as a temporary address because we were temporarily looking for a home. And I wish I would have known to choose a different city that wasn't as challenging for getting all my paperwork done. So that I would say was the biggest challenge, but it took probably also about 5 or 6 months total for the process here. But I, of course, got the Scheidung that I could, travel and utilize in the in-between. I do think I was lucky with my process because I'm married to a German, and because my American passport, I do think, was a little bit helpful in that process. I didn't have any hiccups. I was pretty easily approved. I think having the higher education degrees also helped. I didn't have to prove proof of language. I don't know how I got lucky on that, but
it depends on the clerk's day. If it was a nice day for them, or sometimes you would never know, and sometimes it could be that they didn't know that they need to take it. So it's
that's what I've heard, that it's so different everywhere you are. So we were quite lucky overall with our process, but and we were pretty easy because we know some people that they've waited years to get the documents they need for the visa, and they haven't been able to leave Germany, or they didn't get the right Scheidung, and they can't travel or they can't work. And so we were very, very fortunate in our process, but definitely was a little bit longer.
It helps that you have somebody that can talk to them person to person. Yes. It's really great. But just to clarify what you meant is basically, even though people think Germany is one country, it's basically 16 states. And they have different laws and different regulations. And sometimes in one country, in one state, it will be easier in one visa, and the other visa, it's going to be much difficult. So it's you really need to know where you're going. But tell me, so if you're saying your husband was not born next to Nuremberg, why did you decide to move there, actually?
Oh, yeah. So he's from farther north, about a 3.5 hour drive away. So I don't think he'd ever really visited much of Bavaria actually before. Oh. So for him, it was also very, very new as well. So the company that he works for is based outside of Nuremberg. So that's the decision was made for us to come here to this direction.
And are you happy from that decision?
Sure.
Convincing, yeah.
I think I would rather be near a bigger city, just because of our past experience of being in Shanghai and Singapore, and we're used to bigger city life. So I would rather be more like Munich or Berlin or Cologne or Hamburg, somewhere that has a little bit more metropolitan, more events. We go to Munich quite often. It's only an 1.5-hour drive, or we can go by train, just to be able to go to like theater shows or nicer restaurants or things like that. So it would be nice personally if we could live like closer to a bigger city.
Right. But then, although you were in that thought, you bought a house.
We did.
Let's talk about that.
Yeah.
Tell me about the process. It sounds very exciting.
It is really exciting. We were super, super lucky. So we started looking at the start of the year, and we just were looking online at the normal, German house hunting websites, and we kind of started browsing, and we started setting up appointments, and we looked at probably about maybe 10 to 12.
Oh, wow.
Yep. And so we looked at
A whole hunt.
yeah. We looked at Wohnungen, so apartments and houses. So we wanted to see what our options were for both, just so we could get an idea of what was our price range and what was available in our area. And so we knew we wanted to stay, near Nuremberg. We kind of had a radius that we were looking at. And we were so, so lucky that we went and looked at a home beginning of January, and we signed our contract February 2nd.
Oh,
So
wow.
most people have told us that is not normal, that the process is usually much longer. So we were really, really lucky that the previous, I guess I should say now, homeowner was really great to work with. And so she really made the process very easy, and our realtor was wonderful. So it was a really interesting process because I, of course, don't speak German fluently. My level is only about A2. And so I'm not super confident in my German yet. And everything is in German. So I really don't know how people do it if they don't have someone to translate for them, or you really have to have a realtor that's willing to work with you and speak English. Realtor, we of course didn't choose. She came with the house and was selling the house. And so thankfully my husband was available and able to translate everything and do all the
He had to.
Yeah, because all the documents are in German as well, right? So, and it's a lot. There's a lot of paperwork in Germany.
In general.
So especially for house buying, that was a process. But we did get an official translator when we went to go sign the contract. So that was something that we had the option to do that. And as a spouse, he wasn't allowed to be my translator. So I had to have someone that was non-biased come in to be my translator for the contract for the home, which I would say I highly recommend that. Even if someone has good German, if they're not sure on house terms and, legalities, to have a translator, because it really was helpful to have someone there that was kind of my advocate for the English side. And I could really ask all the questions that I had. I felt very comfortable with that.
That's really great.
So I really do recommend that because that was wonderful. But yeah, the process has been great and smooth and easy. And so we are official homeowners now.
Wow.
It's just crazy. I did not think I would own a home in another country from the one I was born in. But
here we are. I mean, you didn't imagine you're going to go to Shanghai and find a German husband.
No.
So, I mean, surprises are always there.
Life was full of them.
Right. And it's amazing. For those who don't know the process, could you tell a little bit about how was the process to buy the house? Okay, so you found one. What does it involve?
Sure. So once we were interested in that home, we found that home. We contacted the realtor and said, hey, this is it. Here's our offer. She went back and forth with the current homeowner. She accepted the offer. And then the next steps is that you go and have a notary. And so you have to go to a notary, and then they draw up the contract, and they'll send it to you a couple of days to a week beforehand, so you can look over it ahead of time, which is also all in German.
Of course. Na klar.
Yeah, which is why I needed a translator. So she actually translated the document. My husband did as well, just to tell me a little bit ahead of time, but officially she translated it. So I have an English version as well, which is just nice for my own well-being and comfort. So you do the notary appointment, was where you officially sign. What's funny is in America, and I haven't bought a home in America, but I know friends that have, and my parents bought their home and things of that nature. There's usually tons of documents that you sign in these meetings, right? The Germans, I only signed one. I signed one singular paper, and that was it. And I thought that was really funny because I thought I was going to be signing all sorts of documents, and there was just one. So you go and you sign those documents, and then it takes 10 to 12 weeks after that initial contract signing for the process to go through to get approval, because it has to go through your county and state, if you will, for approval, saying that they're not interested in buying the property before you, or they're not interested in it for any reasons, or there's not any conflict of interest or any other challenges, and that everything's approved with like the banks, and that everything would be good to go. And so once that's approved, You then get the bill in the mail for
Oh.
so the bill for the notary comes in, the bill for the realtor comes in, and then you get the bill for the home in the mail, which I just find to be so funny because
Amazing.
yeah, so it came in through the mail, and we got that bill, and then we contacted our bank to go through what we needed for the mortgage and things of that nature. And then they sent the payment through. And so up until this point, all the way up until this point, the current homeowner can still live in the home. So
Oh.
you decide at your contract date what date you'll hand the keys over. If you want to do it before then, you can, if you both parties agree. And so she was still living into the home until this point. And technically, it's her home until all monies are paid from us and until we get the key back from her. So that whole process, we just had that happen about a week or so ago. And so we started all of this at the beginning of February. So it's been a fairly long process. And the longest part really is just getting all the approvals with the notary and with all the documents to go through. It's still not in the official like land registry. That still takes, now that we've officially handed over the payment and we've gotten the keys, we have, I think, a few weeks to have it put in the land registry through the city that we're living in. And then we can go through the official processes with getting everything turned over. So definitely, if you're moving into a home or buying one, to give yourself wiggle room of a few months, just because of all the processes take so much time. And there's a lot of little processes that I just wasn't aware of as an American that we don't necessarily do. In America, usually it's you sign the contract and you pay and you get the keys. And it's your home. Yeah, right?
Bada bing, bada boom, you have a home.
Yeah. And so here it's a little bit of a different process and it's a little bit lengthier. So we gave ourselves we waited about a month after we signed the contract to then give our notice to our landlords. But we were lucky we had the flexibility in that. We were able to do that. So it gives us a little bit of wiggle room and cushion to not have to worry about like those surprise things that could happen with the process in between.
And it can happen. So
Yes.
every process gives the opportunity for surprises,
Yes.
right? Every part of it. Great. All right. So I think it was very interesting to hear because especially that we know in Germany, not a lot of people buy a house. It's something that is not that common than other countries. So a lot of Germans, especially Germans, would prefer to rent for their entire life. People can really die without having any home to their name. So I'm happy you got the experience, even if it's not in America, it's here, but it's something that is quite unique. And I would like to ask you the last question as I ask everybody, if you can give a newcomer to Germany one tip, what would that be?
I don't know if it's a tip as much as like advice, but my advice would be to give yourself grace, grace and understanding. I think with a move to Germany, yes, it's westernized and it may be similar to what you grew up with, but the process can be a little slower than what you're used to, or just a little bit longer for things. A lot of things are heavy on paper usage here. A lot of things go through snail mail. So it's a little bit of a slower process in getting things approved or taken care of. Whereas at home, I think sometimes, especially in America, we're very quick paced and we like our technology. We click a button and things are approved.
Right.
In Germany, it's not that way. And so I think also giving yourself grace and understanding that the language is going to take time. You said about the 3-year period, and even then it takes longer just depending on your language acquisition skills or how much time you can give to it. So I have to remind myself of, it took a lot to move here. Like, even though I've lived abroad, this was completely different than other countries I lived in. And I have to give myself some grace that this takes time, and that I think Germany takes a little bit more time than you anticipate. I think sometimes with some things, just because it is a little bit slower paced living, and it is a little bit of a different kind of lifestyle than other westernized countries, I think. Again, because America is so fast paced and kind of in your face, right?
Right.
Germans are more, no, we like our hikes and we like to slow down and our Sundays are closed.
Right.
So I think that's an adjustment. I think it takes time. So I would just say to remind yourself to give yourself some grace and understanding and to be kind to yourself in the process.
Right. What I take from that is also really breathe. Like, take a deep breath when you come to Germany. First of all, the air is clean enough for you to take a deep breath. But also it's because sometimes you need that really deep breath because you'll have to wait for some things, which we are, as you mentioned, sometimes when we're not used to wait for stuff. Israel is the same, really. And when people come here, they're like, why I am not behind this already, right? Like, why is it not happening? Why do I have to wait 2 weeks for the mail to come? Why? And it happened to me that I signed up for an online app and I got per mail the confirmation that it's
I
registered.
can believe it. Yeah.
And you're like, why? It doesn't make sense. But it is, and it is how it works. Sometimes it's what's good about Germany that you really learn how to slow your pace a little bit. But sometimes it can be really nerve-wracking. So give yourself grace and take a deep, deep breath. Great. So Dara, thank you so much for joining the podcast. I had so much fun, and I hope that you'll come next time and share with us how was it to have your own home, because this is very fresh, and let's see what it brings with it. So thank you so much.
Great. Thank you.
All right. That was it. See you in the next episode.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this episode of Why Germany. If you want to learn more about relocation, make sure to visit overtheoffect.com, your relocation experts.